Donald Trump's latest victim of public attack appears to be Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, his own nominee. In Michael Wolff's newly released book, Slide, The Final Days of the Trump Presidency, Trump unleashes on the justice saying, quote, "Where would he be without me? I saved his life. He wouldn't even be in a law firm. Who would have had him? Nobody. Totally disgraced. Only I saved him. I'm very disappointed." Now, there's a massive caveat that comes with everything Michael Wolff reports, which is that this is allegedly what Donald Trump said, but the value in it is that it sounds exactly like something that Donald Trump would say about Brett Kavanaugh. Behind the scenes on the right, there were always concerns about Kavanaugh. He seemed to be the most sort of palatable nominee at the time. This is the guy who can get past the confirmation. He's the best choice, and I think there has absolutely, this is the same is true of Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. There is already, it's only been a couple of years, a lot of hand-wringing behind the scenes on the right about how that process was handled and whether they were sort of pushed into this position just because they were the most politically palatable people at the time.
And first of all, Trump, if he did say this, he's correct. Like, if Trump had abandoned
100%.
Kavanaugh's done.
100%.
And most presidents previously would have abandoned Kavanaugh at that point. What I'm curious about is why didn't if there were so many concerns, and I had heard some of those as well in the kind of Federalist Society world, that, wait, are we, okay, yeah, he's a good country club Republican, he's a good Bush era partisan, we don't question his bona fides there, but is he really one of us? Is he really with us? If there were those questions, which there were, why didn't they use and exploit his vulnerability to throw him overboard? Because Amy Coney Barrett was right there, and everybody kept saying, well, especially if he goes down over some type of teenage sexual assault allegation, then they're gonna put Amy Coney Barrett in there and move her through. Why didn't they? Was there talk on the right of, you know what? Let's not even take the risk with this guy.
Preaching to the choir on that one. I mean, so I remember at the time I wrote a piece by saying it's actually like there's very good reason, and it's what a lot of people on the right would complain about as identity politics. But I was like, there's good reason for Republicans to nominate a woman for the seat for reasons that, like, women are different than men, and it's actually a very useful thing to have a conservative women's voice in a seat like that. And so I didn't realize at the time it touched such a nerve. I started hearing from people because behind the scenes, and I hadn't picked up on this until after that piece was published, people were really furious about what was happening as more of the research was coming in on Kavanaugh. The more they were learning about him and the more they were learning about Amy Coney Barrett, they were actually really upset about this. I don't know that it was Federalist Society circles, because remember, both of them were on the Federalist Society's list that Trump was relying on really heavily to make these confirmations. That was one thing that Donald Trump did that actually really helped him win voters in the final stretch of the 2016 election, is he was polling from a FedSoc approved list of potential Supreme Court justices. And so I think it was in, sort of these circles, the more people were saying, like, listen, Kavanaugh's a Bush guy. This is the Trump era. We're looking through these decisions and, like, yeah, I guess he's safe, but Amy Coney Barrett is, like, so much better. And I have no idea. I mean, I think it was just the entrenched interests, the people from conservative movement legal circles that Donald Trump had surrounded himself with in the White House had a lot of faith and trust in Kavanaugh because they knew him really well.
Yeah, and not just a Bush guy. Like, he was basically a member of the Bush family, like an honorary member of the Bush family. There's a particular type of social climber in Washington that takes their networking beyond what people outside of Washington could even imagine. Kavanaugh ended up marrying this Bush's secretary. And maybe it was true love, and I'm sure they have a very blah blah blah. But when you see that, when you see these strategic marriages, often you're like, okay, wow, that's some impressive calculation that's going on here. Bush, in fact, Bush came in for him when he was under the gun, and made multiple calls to Susan Collins. At the time, Collins is also a kind of honorary member of the Bush circle. So yeah, it'll always be confusing to me why the right went to war for basically a Bushy at that moment.
And so what's really interesting, more context, I mean, I think it's normal for people who work together to end up getting married. It is an insight into how Kavanaugh was a known quantity in Washington, D.C. And so what you had is all of these sort of entrenched Republicans whispering in Donald Trump's ear that, like, you need to go with a known quantity because we cannot risk this process crumbling. We need to get this passed. We need it to be easy and we need it to be safe. And Amy Coney Barrett was seen as somebody who could inflame a culture war because you have a woman, you have a Catholic woman, and I believe Brett Kavanaugh is Catholic as well. But they were like, this is as we've covered Ken Buck, or what was it, Ken Buck? Someone saying, oh no, it was Mike Johnson from Louisiana saying, like, listen, I know her. I think she's situated to overturn Roe. I think that's something that she would do.
Right.
Yeah, and so it was seen as like, we would be picking a culture war fight. And in the Trump era, there's a segment of the right that's like, hell yeah, lean into it. This is what we need to do. This is our moment. Like, go with ACB. And then you have the people saying, no, this is too important, the sort of entrenched Republican interests. You go with the known quantity. And the known quantity is Brett Kavanaugh. This is something that we can do easily. Remember right. People were saying, this is the easiest thing in the world. And you had been reporting on this at the time. That was freaking Republicans out because the whole thing with Kavanaugh is like, we already have a file on him. We can do this in 60 days. It'll be so easy.
So why? Explain to folks why is the right upset with Kavanaugh now?
I mean, he's come out in decisions. I mean, the right already was like looking at Kavanaugh's record was already something where people were like, listen, before he was even confirmed, people were like, listen, this is not the best record compared with Amy Coney Barrett or compared with some of these other options. And so I think people have just sort of seen what they would, I guess, interpret as moderate decisions. It's sort of the same thing with Gorsuch. I think they've kind of been back and forth, which is, in my opinion, what justices are supposed to do. They're not supposed to be like complete ideologues. We're supposed to see them follow the letter of the Constitution as best they can. So I'm not particularly disturbed by a lot of this. I think it was predictable with Gorsuch. I think it was fairly predictable with Kavanaugh, and people probably would say that was the case. And I kind of guess that's the question at the end of the day is, okay, so if this was predictable, what were we doing?
Right.
What were we doing?
Trump, one more regret to put on the pile.
Yeah, well, and that's also, though, seen as such a cultural flashpoint. People on the right really think that's what galvanized a lot of people to their side. They think it galvanized a lot of women to their side, watching the sort of treatment of Kavanaugh play out in the public square in a way that they felt they had seen a lot of their sons be treated like on college campuses back in the sort of days of those awful Title IX battles that were happening just about 10 years ago. And so a lot of people on the right believe that Kavanaugh sticking to his guns and Trump sticking with Kavanaugh is one of the essential moments in the culture war.
Although they followed it by getting smashed in the suburbs, particularly among women, and then lost the presidential election 2 years later.
And there's a whole lot more going on there. But yeah, no, absolutely true. Well, we will be back with more Rising right after this.